Okay, so I'm going to just introduce myself first. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Black and National Parks Week. I am super excited. Today's theme is, it's day 5. Today's theme is culture and community. Um, and I have a special guest with me today from Mammoth Cave National Park, Jerry Bransford, and I'm super excited to talk to him as he is a descendant of the enslaved tour guides that were part of mapping out Mammoth Cave. And yeah, this is just something I'm really excited to learn more about the history, the untold stories, the connections, and more about this important connection to that space and why that's important to Jerry, as well as family and people wanting to visit the park or have visited the park and want to in the future. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Jerry to the stage. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Okay.
And you're good.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to meet you and share the story. I feel that I had a great opportunity at age 57 to go to work for Mammoth Cave National Park after having a 30-year career with a huge Fortune 5 company. And I feel that I'm led to tell a story that's been around since 1838, and it ended in 1941. And after my ancestors left the park, as it was in a short time, it was as if they had never been there. So
Mhm.
I'm glad to tell their story. Their story,
Yes, thank you.
bunch of stories to tell.
Yes, thank you again so much for being a part of this week with me and um, bringing into this conversation the importance of the history of national parks, especially Black history. So, without further ado, I'm going to get started with my first question for you. Can you share, because I know a lot of people are probably not familiar with you as a park ranger, or even knowing of your family history and connection to Mammoth Cave. So, can you share your personal connection to the park and how your family's history has shaped your career as a park ranger?
Well, yeah. Beginning in 1838, my great great grandpa Matt and his brother Nick were rented to Franklin Gorin of Glasgow, who was owner of the cave. They were born in Nashville, Tennessee in 1815, in 1817 in slavery. And Franklin Gorin, attorney at law at Glasgow, Kentucky, which is pretty close to Nashville, had owned a slave named Stephen Bishop. And after paying $5,000 for the cave in 1838, he realized that a single 17-year-old slave boy couldn't possibly meet the demands of exploring, guiding, and charting the cave. So he spent to go to Nashville and talk to his relative business partner, Thomas Bransford of Nashville, about
Wow.
renting and these slave boys to Mammoth Cave for $100 a year each as two of the three original slave guides.
So did they have background knowledge of the area, or what was their knowledge of that place during that time?
Well, we really don't know much about their background except Nick and Matt, my great greats, were born in Nashville in 1815 and 1817. And Stephen Bishop, we don't really know as much about him because we think that his owner was also his father. We
Mm.
also know that Thomas Bransford of Nashville, Tennessee, was heir to King Henry III of England, and he fathered my great great grandfather Matt from a little slave girl named Little Hannah that his daddy
Mhm.
owned in Nashville in 1815.
Wow.
So they were brought up. So these teenage boys were brought up from Nashville and Glasgow. Now, Stephen Bishop had been there a while longer, and that's how Franklin Gorin, his owner and owner of the cave, realized that he couldn't possibly meet the demands. So that's how he had an idea of renting my four parents for $100 a year each. So these
Hmm.
slave boys were brought up from Nashville and introduced to free white men who were the earliest guides, Archibald Miller and Joe Shackelford, that these
Hmm.
slave boys were introduced to. And it seems right away that they were interested and highly highly excited to become tour guides in that cave.
Mhm.
They were
So
willing.
what were,
Pardon
oh,
me.
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's records show that they were willing learners, and they caught on to the niche of exploring and guiding in that cave called Mammoth.
Wow. Which is just an infinite amount of tunnels and pathways now. So wow, that's really cool. So what are some of the, I guess, lesser known stories or contributions of the enslaved tour guides from Mammoth Cave um that you think people should know, or that's not part of what's already out there?
Interesting, because things are still drifting in. Just early this summer, a memoir came in from a advanced researcher, and we know that in 1875, Nick and Matt Bransford and a slave named Will Garvin escorted Mary Todd Lincoln through Mammoth Cave.
Oh wow.
And we found the story where she said these men were interesting men. She didn't say a lot about them, but surely
Mhm.
enough, they were her guides. And then
Wow.
another,
So
and one of the more interesting things that I've read, a memoir came in from Asheville, North Carolina, about 15 years ago, and
mhm.
that's one of the more fun, interesting ones to me. If you wanted to hear it now.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, this was before it was a Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So the lady,
Hmm.
that the family found her memoir somewhere in an old house, and they thought Mammoth Cave of Kentucky would be interested in having it, and they shared it with me. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase some of the things it says. It says we
Hmm.
had a horrid 5-day stagecoach ride over those hills in East Tennessee that we now call the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Hmm.
On the 5th day, we finally arrived at Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. After freshening up and going to bed, we were given these lanterns and told to go down to the cave entrance and meet our guides. And they turned out to be slave guides, Nick and Matt
Hmm.
Brown. It says these men were interesting men. They were well accented. They spoke great English, and they were perfect hosts for our mission in going into the cave for a short tour of about 8 hours.
Wow.
That
Short
would
tour of 8 hours.
that short tour, 8 hours. And it says Nick was the quieter of the two. It says he was more reserved, but he was in no way inferior to his brother Matt. Now we found out in recent years that Matt and Nick didn't look so much genetically the same. So we even though they were sent up from Nashville as brothers, they really weren't brothers.
Hmm.
Had the same mother or a different father, but
Hmm.
the Nashville makes it very clear that he's going to Louisville, and on his way back to Nashville, he's going to stop by Mammoth Cave and see his son, Madison Bransford. And we find it so unusual and strange that Thomas was a married man with children of his own, but he in
Hmm.
no way denied his slave son, Madison Bransford of Mammoth Cave.
So what was the age range or the age difference between the brothers, or technically half brothers?
About 2 years,
2 years.
year and a half, yeah. Mhm.
Hmm.
And the mother was named Little Hannah. It was a little slave girl named Little Hannah that's specifically mentioned. Now, you probably wonder how I get some of the facts that I have. Well, there's a
Hmm.
white man in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, who has the slave record books.
Oh
And I'm
wow.
first time last year. And it goes into very great detail what some of the slaves sold for. It talks
Hmm.
about Thomas Bransford being a member of the 1861 Tennessee State Senate, that he was heir to King Henry III of England, and that he was a wealthy farmer and slave owner in the Nashville area. And again, I was saying a while ago that we found out that his plantation was a place called Bransford, Tennessee, which is not too far south of where I am. That's where the plantation once was.
And we're familiar with the slave owner names, or play a part in the names of the enslaved, correct?
Correct. And in the record book, and there's some folks that I met, and we talked on the phone for about 20 years. Her name is Pat Bransford Davis, and
Hmm.
and was at the Grand Ole Opry, which takes place in Nashville, Tennessee. And Nashville, Tennessee isn't very far from Glasgow, Kentucky, my
Hmm.
hometown. So it also mentions that Thomas Bransford had property in Glasgow, Kentucky. So she says about 25 years ago, she says, well, while we're in Nashville, Tennessee, we're going to Glasgow to see if we can find Bransfords there.
Right.
And she found my father's name in the phone book.
Mm.
She says, Mr. Bransford, I want you to know that I'm Pat Bransford Davis, and I'm from Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas area, actually a place called Morgan Mill, which is about 60 miles west of Dallas. And she says, I have some very interesting material that perhaps you're interested in knowing about your family and my family, sir, if you're interested. Well, my
Right.
dad said, well, I have a son in Glendale, which is about an hour north, and he's been researching and asking me questions about our family at Mammoth Cave for years. So perhaps you'd like to know him. So
Hmm.
that's how we
Hmm.
became acquainted. And that's how I received some of the incredible records that Thomas Bransford and his heir to King Henry III, and how he was a slave owner, and the whole thing. It's just a very powerful American story.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, this is amazing. So for, I guess I kind of want to just go into your story. Like, how did you fit into this history and becoming a park ranger? Can you share more about your upbringing and how you got to be a park ranger of Mammoth Cave?
Well, I can. Yeah, at a very young, Mammoth Cave National Park is very close to my hometown of Glasgow. So we would go to Mammoth Cave often as a kid at home. And my dad says, "Boys, I want you to know that I was born and raised over here." Now we go up on the ridge they call Flint Ridge. He said, "Now the schoolhouse and church was once down there," and he said, "I was baptized in that river down there." He said the name of the church was Pleasant Union Baptist Church, and he said our kinfolk bought the land for that church and schoolhouse even before the Civil War ended, hoping that the Civil War would end because he knew that black children need education just the same as those white kids over there. So the
Hmm.
church was in existence for years. But what's most interesting about it, my dad made sure that we knew our connection to Mammoth Cave. We would go
Right.
down the cave entrance when I was a young kid, seeing those guides come up in the national park uniform, and they some of them probably didn't know me, but one or two
Hmm.
of them knew my father because my father was there until he was 18. So some of those white fellows in uniform would look over at us and say, "Hey, David, how you doing today?" And my dad say, "Hey, Shorty, how you getting along?" And
Hmm.
so I'm saying those kinds of things were so important to me, but I had no idea that I would ever become a tour guide. So to
Right.
continue my story, a young person who's a graduate of Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, which is real close by, came to Mammoth Cave, and she's a historian and she's a columnist, and she was a tour guide. So she would go into the cave and she see all these names on the cave wall of Bransfords.
Hmm.
She would go into the library in Conturio and see these interesting pictures and these letters and things, and it was said and thought that they were Stephen Bishop. But she says,
Hmm.
"No, these people can't be Stephen Bishop. Some of these dates says that Stephen Bishop had been deceased for almost 100 years." So she researched and she went into her own private investigation. She found out that these black men were Bransfords. They were either
Hmm.
brothers' boys. So so she became acquainted. Joy Lyons became acquainted with me through my father. Upon
Hmm.
my retirement, she would invite me to Mammoth Cave during National Negro History Week. She would invite me
Hmm.
to Mammoth Cave to talk about the Bransford Resort, the hotel, and then and after her hearing about my retirement, she came to me and she says, "Jerry, I would love to have you as a tour guide. Are you interested in bringing the Bransford name back to
Hmm.
Mammoth Cave?" Well, I was already 57 years old. And I said, "Gee, I don't
Hmm.
know. Uh, I just didn't. I just didn't know because it was a very low guide force of people of color. Of
Yeah.
course, past president of the Hardin County branch of the NAACP. So I don't feel intimidated or afraid to go anywhere. You see, it's just
Hmm.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to become a tour guide because I'd only been retired for 16 months after a 30-year career with this big company. So I
Right.
applied for a job, and And 2 years later, I was accepted by the National Park Service. So I brought the Bransford name back. I get to wear a uniform that none of my kinfolk were able to wear. And I felt honored to tell their stories. I feel honored to share the stories with you. Some
Mm-hmm.
happy, some of the stories are terribly sad. Sometimes I go to the cave and I see their names on the cave wall after my four parents lost their children, and it brings a tear to my eye. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel honored to be in a position that I can tell a lot of folks about our story, how we were there for 101 years and then became a national park, and all the black men, every black man that went away from there were not Bransfords, but most of us were. It was about 7 Bransfords. And
Mm-hmm.
Judge Janning, the estate's manager, heard that Mammoth Cave was going to become the 26th national park possibly. And about 2 years before it became a national park, he called all the black men in and says, men, and while I was the executive here, I could keep you coloreds on. He says, but in about a year and a half, you're going to have no work here. You need to be
Mm-hmm.
looking at what you're going to do. And that's how my folks left. And they left quite sad and brokenhearted. Now I feel driven. I feel
Mm-hmm.
inspired to tell their stories for men that worked there for 4 generations,
Right.
best kings and queens to the cave, best educated, most economically fitted folks to the cave, and then became a national park, and the national park uniform came into place, and none of them were any longer qualified to do a job that we done for 4 generations. All the
Mm-hmm.
white grandfathered into the uniforms, but none of the black
Wow.
were. But I will say this: even though Kentucky is considered South, the black and
Mm-hmm.
white and the black and white families over there on that 54,000 acres, which is now Mammoth Cave National Park, they did pretty well considering all. But I guess Judge Janning, the estate's manager,
Mm-hmm.
realized he'd have no work for the black men. So
Mm.
when he came back in 2004, it hadn't been a Bransford there for about 75 years.
Wow. Wow. So you mentioned the generational the list of the generations and the names. I just wanted to um again help people understand like the importance of the generational um connection. So how many generations back does this go? This the family history?
Including me, 5.
5. Wow.
I'm recent, but from 19 and 41 until 2004, there wasn't one of us there.
Mm-hmm.
So then after meeting Joy Line, she was very, very interested in the Black history of Mammoth Cave. So it would invite me down there and hoping that I would accept the job or would apply for a job, and I did. But I knew about the church and the schoolhouse. The name
Right.
of the Pleasant Union Baptist Church, which was combined with the schoolhouse. And my
Mm-hmm.
dad was up on what we call the ridge, and we would look down the lane because my dad would go up there when I was a young kid and say, boys, this is where I was born. I used to play in those woods over there, and that church over there is why I used to go to church. As a matter of fact, my uncle and my dad was 2 members of that church, and my uncle was the pastor, and my father was one of the deacons there.
Mm.
I knew that much about the story, and I knew about Henry Bransford, my great grandfather, but I didn't seem to know much beyond he. Henry was one of he was the only one of 4 children left to Parthena and Madison Bransford. The other 3 children were sold off during
Right.
this. But Madison was able to recover 2 girls, but the boy named Thomas, he never came back, and we were only ever told that probably he was sold into Memphis, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the memoir that we have that was provided by the White Bransfords of Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, it mentions that Matt says, "Now, my boy named Thomas, he's a little bit palsy. That may be, and we have a more modern name for. Apparently, he had some sort of a birth defect,
Right. Mm-hmm.
but he says he'll probably never work in the cave."
Mm.
But anyway, the Civil War came on, and the Civil War was on, and economics were probably pretty tough. So we
Yeah.
were told that old master knocked on the cabin door. He says, Matt, come out here. I've got something I've got to tell you. Matt says, sir, well, what is it, sir? Did I do something wrong? He says, no, but I've got to sell. He says, financially, I'm stripped and I've got to sell three of them children of yours.
Mm.
Matt said, no, sir, please don't sell my children. Would you take me instead, sir?
Hmm.
He said, no, no, I've got to have those two girls and that boy. Well, his wife, Parthena, they say she overheard the conversation. She came out and she got on her knees. She said, Master, please don't sell my children. She said, would you take me instead? He said, no, girl, you get back in that cabin, I'll whip you again. If
Mm.
no, whipped her sometime. So the children were tied behind a rider. Now, this much of the story I'd heard about, but I was able to document it according to the records that the white Bransford and Dallas Fort Worth, Texas area have. They say they were tied behind a rider and led away from Mammoth Cave. And my great great grandma, Parthena, went running down that road. So, oh, master said, please don't take my children. Please don't take my children. So a James Rushing Fowler, a Union soldier and abolitionist, came from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I
Hmm.
suppose most Americans know what an abolitionist is or who they were.
Hmm.
He heard about Matt losing those children. And here's what he said to Matt. It's all documented on the internet. He says, Matt, it seems that when you slaves lose your children, it doesn't seem to bother you, they say. Matt said, no, sir. Oh, don't you believe that, sir?
Mm.
Slave got feeling just the same as free people. He said, now I'm a man and I could take it, though it went mighty hard. When they sold that last girl, she's just 14 years old. He said, well, Matt, I think the war may be over next year and the North is winning this war. You could probably go back to Nashville. He said, no, sir. He said, it's been 2 years now since they sold that last girl. And every day my wife go down that dusty road thinking those children gonna come back. He says, sir, I don't ever think they'd be back. He says, but Matt, remember, you could go back to Nashville where you was born. He said, no, sir, I could never go back to Nashville now. I've been in the cave all my life. The cave's in my blood. Plus, if I go back to Nashville and my children come back, they wouldn't know where to find me. So that's how come we stay on the Mammoth Cave, we think. That Matt felt safe and his brother Nick working in the cave, escorting free people, making pretty good money and tips. Old Matt to let him keep some of that money, you see. So after
Hmm.
the war, we stood on the Mammoth Cave. That became our home. That became our home from 1839, 1838 to 1941. So
Mm.
that's my story, how we came to Mammoth Cave, why we came to Mammoth Cave, and some of the things we did. And after the Civil War, we chose to stay on, and that became our home indefinitely until the government fired all the black men. Well, let me make a correction here.
Okay.
United, the United States government says they did not turn the black men away. However, I will say that probably in the 1930s and 40s, there was no black men working for the National Park Service in the National Park uniform,
Hmm.
probably laborers. So I just want to make sure the United States government says they didn't have a role in that. So in our case, Judge Jennings, the state's manager, is the person that we think called the black men in and told them that he'd have no work for them.
Mm.
Judge Jennings
I'm
was,
gonna
pardon me?
I'm gonna pull up the photos, some of the photos that you sent me, just again to have a visual, so people know um, who you're referencing, what you're referencing. So this first image, do you see?
I do. That's Madison
Okay.
Bransford, great great grandfather. He was actually invited to go to Louisville, Kentucky by prominent white businessmen. And they thought so much of him that he was a guest there. And that picture is a professional picture made downtown Louisville. You can see his walking stick, you can see his lantern, you can see the basket that he carried food for his guests. And also
Hmm.
on the right side underneath his shoulder is the oil for his lamp. So
Mm.
that's a planned picture. Matt Bransford, my great great grandfather. Recently, that picture came up on eBay, and a local person paid $5,000 for the original.
Wow. Wow. And there was no extensive damage to it,
In very good
or do
condition,
you very good condition?
very good condition. And there's also another picture that I hadn't shown you that Mrs. Keller, Ferdinand Ricard, a Danish artist, came from Holland to Mammoth Cave in the
Hmm.
50s, and he thought so much of Nick and Matt that he actually sketched their pictures.
Oh
So
wow.
Keller's Mrs. Keller was from Louisiana, and
Hmm.
Mrs. Keller passed away. Ferdinand Ricard was Mrs. Keller's great grandfather, and so
Hmm.
they passed away. The family knew of me in Kentucky, and they thought that they were selling up the house and the estate of their parents. So they agreed
Mm.
that they wanted to give the original sketch to Jerry Bransford, and I have it home here with me, stored away.
Mm.
This is
So
actually,
how
but the one I have is a sketch.
okay. So how much of the equipment do you actually um have, or is there any that you have kept in your family?
No, no, I do not.
No.
This is a good example of the open face foil oil lantern, his basket, his cane. But these
Hmm.
facts I do not have. You know,
Hmm.
it would have been wonderful if we had some of these original things. Some of these things are in the material at Mammoth Cave in the museum, at Mammoth Cave National Park.
So I just want to go to this next one because again, you've mentioned this. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clicking on the right. Yep, there it is.
This is a footstone. After being at Mammoth Cave a while, even before I became a National Park Ranger, Joy Lyons, who I give so much credit to, that the story wouldn't be where it is today. She says, I'm going to take you up. She says, one day I was hiking through the woods at Mammoth Cave National Park. She was a young person and hiked. And so she came up on this cemetery in the cave,
Hmm.
the park. And she says she saw Henry Bransford's headstone there. I guess I should have sent you a picture of Henry Bransford. Henry Bransford was my great grandfather. At that, you know, he was the only one of the four original children, or their children left. So upon his death at age 43, his kids made sure they had a proper burial. So
Hmm.
walking through the woods, Joy Lyons, so that I came up on this cemetery. I didn't know
Hmm.
exactly where I was, but I saw this one headstone that says Henry Bransford, guide of Mammoth Cave, 1843 to 1894. And she said, I was so overwhelmed. She said, I shed a tear because I knew something of the family, and I was really close to where their home place used to be.
Wow.
So going up to the cemetery, not too much longer after Joy Lyons found it, with
Mm.
friends, we hiked down through the woods over thistles, briars, and logs, and out in the middle of what is nowhere is a family cemetery. So I felt led to restore this cemetery.
Mm.
And so volunteers and myself have been about 12 years clearing that cemetery and trying to make it to be a place to celebrate rather than a place to make you sad, you see.
Mm.
So I thought, well, I would like to have a obsolete stone there with the names of the Bransford guides on there. Well, I thought it would be a simple process.
Right.
So you have an idea of what how the national park and the federal government does things?
Mm. I feel
I
like
was
it's very complicated, right?
very educated. I was about 6 years getting permission to put that obelisk stone in there. I thought the hardest part is going to be able to raise the funds. Well,
Wow.
I was able to raise about $10,000 real quickly. But little did I know the biggest obstacle was to get permission to bring the stone in there. So the folks at Mammoth Cave,
Mm.
Ferdinand Hart, the superintendent, and other people helped me get this done. It had to be cleared by the state of Kentucky, Southeast Regional, and then on to Washington, D.C. And I was delighted that they had a special meeting telling me that we finally had got permission to put this headstone in place.
Hmm.
So you see me standing by that headstone means so much to me. And then the COVID virus came because the stone had to come from India. It's a
Oh,
black
wow.
it's a black marble and weighs over 6,000 pounds. So I found a
Goodness.
company that worked very diligently with me getting that stone in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I can, if you wanted, I could send you other pictures of Henry's headstone and how the cemetery actually looked before we started on it. On next week, on Tuesday, we're going into the cemetery, and see, the federal government won't have anything to do with the maintenance of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's over 80 cemeteries on that reservation down there of
Wow.
54,000 acres. Only the cemeteries on the main thoroughfare are maintained. So I feel driven as long as I can, hoping that they'll adopt our cemetery as a historic interpretation program. But until that time, folks like me will have to keep that cemetery up, and I'm determined to do that. About six of
Mm-hmm.
us Tuesday will go in there with hand tools and keep it trimmed up. I dread,
Yeah.
if it ever going back like I first saw it.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really cool to see this layout of the generations. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know that, it took so long for this to be created, the footstone itself. So that's, yeah, helpful information to know of just, it's interesting though. Just, yeah, like that's your family's legacy, but there were still so many complicated layers of actually getting that done, um, through the Park Service.
And I want to tell you something else. We also know that the black guides were required in some situations to train their successors.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to speak specifically of Lewis Bransford, my great uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis, proud man, and my dad said he thought he would go back before management as Judge Jennings at Mammoth Cave and says, Judge, I have been here all my life. And my daddy before me and his daddy before him. Is there a chance that you could reconsider us men of color staying on? And Judge Jennings, we assume, says, no, you'll have to go. So those men being proud men, they only had the option of working for the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Great
Right.
Depression. So let me tell you this as carefully as I can. Going into the cave and seeing Lewis's name and Elsie and Matt and Lewis, all these guys, cousins and uncles, I can only imagine the humiliation that they must have felt becoming pick and shovel men on
Mm-hmm.
trail that they treaded people for years as tour guides. That really kind of breaks my heart, you see.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell their stories and I can wear the uniform. They couldn't wear the uniform. They were required to train their successors, who were Caucasian men, to do their jobs, and they did it with so much dignity. And then
Mm-hmm.
they became pick and shovel men. Pick and shovel men means these are the people that are preparing the trails in the cave to become America's 26th national park. So I find myself wondering the hurt and humiliation you must have felt having a white straw boss, so to speak, telling
Mm-hmm.
you telling you what to do on trails that your foreparents had walked over for 100 years. And so now you're no longer to be a tour guide. And so you're looking for a job to do the best you can. And some
Right.
of these fellows worked with picks and shovels until that stint of their life was over. And then some of them moved on to Chicago, Illinois. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
moved to Glasgow. Some moved to Louisville. And that's when the Bransford legacy ended in 1941.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps if you and others can understand how I feel so powerfully led to tell their stories for men who gave so much for 101 years, and then shortly after they were sent away, it was as though they were never there at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So did it click for you? I know you mentioned, at the age of 57 being asked to be a tour guide. Was did you feel that sense of purpose once you realized, thinking back on the legacy and the impact?
Yes, I really did. Plus, I like working down there. It's not very far from where I live. It's almost like going home every day. I can go to
Mm-hmm.
the cemetery when I want. I go into the cave and I find names of people that's kin to me.
Mm-hmm.
I find that a joy and a privilege. Although they're not here, I want to make sure that other people know that they left their names in the cave, something I can't do. But
Right.
we match, and every time we think we've seen the last of Matt and Nick's name, their names
Mm.
continue to be found further out and deeper down in that cave. So they were literally enough that they could leave their name in the cave. And that makes me, and that gives me such joy that I go down deep in the cave, 3 miles out, and I find Nick's name, August 17th, 1857. Isn't that something?
Wow. Wow. That's making me emotional because that's, yeah, just their way of saying that I was here, you know?
Here. I was
Wow.
here, and now I would like to think that they would say, and I'm glad that I've got a relative that's back here to let you know that I was here. And that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I've tried to do. I've given it everything I possibly could to tell their story. Not in an angry and belligerent way, but I just want
Yeah.
you to know this is something that needs to be told, and I've done just that. I've
Mm.
been able to do it in national park conventions. I've been interviewed by National Public Radio, the New York
Mm-hmm.
USA Today, the Chicago Tribune. I just want you to know what happened. Not
Mm-hmm.
not that I did it, but I got some kin folks that did that for a long time, and folks back there didn't treat them so good. Now we
Right.
can't live back there where that is, but I want to tell you what happened here, and I want to make sure this story never goes away again.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next photo because you did mention, sorry, your hand is starting to cover up the camera,
Okay.
um, blocking your face. Sorry. Okay, I can see you now.
Okay.
I'm going to move on to the next photo because you did mention the church. So can you share a little bit more about this space?
Yeah, this is the Methodist Church room in the cave. It's a typical thoroughfare on a historic tour. Other tours go through there, but this is one of the bigger rooms in Mammoth Cave, and perhaps you can see why it's called Mammoth Cave. Uh, James, this is the place that they had church service about 1839. It is said that a minister named George Slaughter Gatewood would take this 1/2 mile walk into the cave with his congregation in the early days, and there's a place called Pulpit Rock that he would climb up and have church in the church room.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, sing in the cave there each first Sunday in December, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a Christmas gala singing there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, an annual event. It was on hold for a while during the COVID virus thing, but I understand that they've taken it up again. So it's a very wonderful place. The acoustics are just incredible down there. So I'm standing there. Someone took a picture of me or took a picture for me. So I like that picture. So I thought I'd show it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's massive. Um, wow. I can only imagine the work that went into um locating these spaces and yeah, being creating
Oh,
them, producing them for people to utilize and walk through. I can
yeah.
only imagine the hard work that took.
Well, there was some rocks cleared, but there's never been any blasting of power tools in that cave. It's just a massive, huge cave that was formed by ancient streams of water
Hmm.
way back tens of thousands and millions of years ago.
Wow. So is this, do you know how long this part of the cave is, the length?
Well, the cave system is that the cave system to date, the last statistic I heard was 426 miles. Now, about 20 miles of it's open to the public, but I'm saying
Hmm.
some of it's very gentle and not so gentle. Some of it's not so forgiving, but about 20
Right.
miles that we tour guide our visitors through.
Hmm.
Some of it can be very unforgiving.
Yeah.
Place-
Yeah, which is why I'm like thinking like I mean, not even necessarily creating the walkways, passageways themselves, but even being able to see, like you're saying the equipment that they had, oil lamps and
Mhm.
yeah, all of that. I can't imagine having to navigate, but also not know what you're walking into.
You can search. I'm sorry that I can't think of the name, but my great great grandfather Matt in 1870 escorted a photographer from Cincinnati, Ohio, to do
Mhm.
the stereographic slides in the cave. And that was down on the Elko River. And I'm having to tell you that he had to tote that heavy equipment a long way to get that equipment down there.
Wow. Wow. 426 miles. And then you said how many can be used by the public?
Probably about 20 miles.
Mhm.
Places that I've been allowed to go with other employees with permission of the government, that they sometimes let us go on special excursions as an employee.
Mhm.
I've seen parts of the cave that perhaps most visitors have not seen, because they'll let us go with permission. About 14 of us are sometimes allowed to go in parts of the cave that's not showcased or no longer showcased.
So do you recall when you were visiting how much of the cave was accessible when you were younger?
Well, I don't know, but when I first came to Mammoth Cave in 2004, they said about 315 miles what
Hmm.
was known. And the Cave Research Foundation, who are volunteers, are people that go and explore the caves. As a matter of fact, I'm going to guess this holiday weekend, very well trained and skillful volunteers will go into the cave looking for more cave.
Mm.
They are called the Cave Research Foundation. They get into dreadful, deep down, muddy places in water,
Hmm.
uh, tight crevices to add to the mileage of the cave.
Wow.
You have to be sort of a special person to want to do that.
Yeah.
Because I've
Yeah.
been
It's an
places,
adventure, it sounds like.
yeah, well, I've been in some places very interesting where you crawl on your belly like a reptile for maybe 30 or 40 yards, and you have to kind of squeeze to this and the other. It's very adventurous. So that's why I say
Mm.
exploring is something that a lot of people want to do, but some
Hmm.
they find out that it's not really for everybody.
Yeah, especially if you're claustrophobic. So I want to move on to the next question. Thinking about, I guess, the engagement eh, with, I guess, with regards to programming and education and um, people visiting. In what ways do you believe the park itself can better engage with and honor the legacies of your family?
Well, not only my family, but there were other black guys like Bob Lively, much
Hmm.
and Dole. So I'm just mentioning some other black guys that were there.
Hmm.
I think that Mammoth Cave National Park is really doing everything they can to accelerate the black story. For many years, again, the story went untold. But since I've been there, they actively recruit young people of color. Uh, they actively recruit or make it known that they would like to have more people of color working there. I wouldn't
Hmm.
have that, but I am there. So I commend Mammoth Cave National Park for having that desire. They've taken some steps to, for example, doing National Negro History Week last year. They had an interpretive walk down to our cemetery, and they
Hmm.
tell the story. They have people in uniform that tell folks what happened here. This was once a black community, and it was fairly integrated. So we want to tell you that the schoolhouse and church was here, and this is the Bransford Cemetery, and we want to tell you some of the things that's attached to it. So I
Hmm.
was very proud of that, and I think my presence there, those 19 years, made a difference in some of these things.
Hmm. Hmm. So how can visitors support this work, the efforts to preserve and promote these stories?
I think it asks questions about the Black history of the cave. There's several things in the museum that could be maybe more movies made. I'm
Hmm.
hoping that the superintendent has made it very clear to me that one of the things that he would like to see happen is have the cemetery trail and an interpretive walk. And see, I know that if it becomes an interpretive walk, and if it's adopted by the National Park Service, then
Yeah.
I know that it will be kept. I know that it won't have to be volunteers to go there to make sure that the maintenance kept up, and I would be very happy for that. Plus, it would be some very interesting things to tell them to tell people about what happened down there. Black folks used to live here. Now you can't look at this because there's 80 years of growth,
Yeah.
but occasionally you find a wagon wheel. There's a Bransford spring where old folks used to get water. There's
Hmm.
a place down there where Matt Bransford had a hotel. Did you know about his hotel resort?
No, news
I'm,
to me.
I'm gonna send you a picture of Matt Bransford's hotel resort. He and his wife Zimmy had a place as nice as any place that you could find. It's only one of two black establishments that's actually recorded in the Blue Book by AAA Auto Club in the 1920s. It
Is
was
this, wait, do you mean the Green Book?
the Green Book. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Green. Oh, okay. So there's an actual, like, if you were to go, well, I'm sure they don't have a lot of original copies, probably aren't, but if you were to look up a location, that would be one of the locations that was utilized.
Absolutely. And Judge Janney,
Awesome.
at this time in earlier days, typically well-to-do Caucasian folks came to Mammoth Cave and they would have servants.
Hmm.
So Bransford, who's third generation, so that's third generation, he is the great grandson of the first Matt.
Hmm.
So Judge Jennings, whom he had a very great relationship with, recognized that there was that a place was needed for black people to stay. So he helped Matt Bransford, third generation, and his wife Zimmy to establish that hotel there. It's called Matt Bransford Summer Resort. I'll send you pictures of it. He had a mailer. He and his wife Zimmy would go to Niagara Falls by train and pass
Hmm.
out postcards. And if you're colored and you come to Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, don't worry about a place to stay because my wife Zimmy and I have a place for you to stay just as nice as any place that you could, about $2 a day.
Mm.
So it says, if you come to Mammoth Cave, tell the cabbie to bring you to Matt Bransford's place. We'll
Hmm.
put for a reasonable cost. It's clean and sanitary with high rooms with sanitary views of the forestry.
Mm.
It's exactly where that hotel once was. And my dad would tell me about that.
Wow. So what's there now?
Just forestry because the Civilian Conservation Corps demolished all the buildings for this 600 families that used to live on the 54,000 acres.
Mm.
So when you go down, you can find a wagon wheel or a piece of tin or an old coal bucket to let you know what once was. These are
Hmm.
considered facts, and the United States government forbid people to pick these things up.
Mm. Interesting. So what advice would you give to visitors thinking about the wanting, I guess, to know more about the deep cultural and historical significance of Mammoth Cave? What do you feel like they still need more of, or to have a better understanding of that uh, historical significance of your family and other Black families that were doing that work as well?
I think they've taken a step in that direction. There's a place called the Amphitheater that a lot of national parks have. They have the
Hmm.
evening program, and they have a lot of the Black history given by the interpretive rangers at Mammoth Cave, specifically talking about the Matt Bransford Hotel and the
Hmm.
Bransford Legacy and other Black guides. When I first came to Mammoth Cave, that wasn't in place, but they have evening programs that's specifically targeted about the Black history of Mammoth Cave. I think that's
Hmm.
I think that's a great step in the right direction.
So what does this all mean to you moving forward? Because currently you're retired, but you do volunteer still at Mammoth Cave. Can you share a little bit about that, what your role is now, and how you still can contribute to sharing the legacy?
Well, yeah, I just recently I had young people from Tennessee State University in Nashville, and the United States government asked me. The United States government asked me if I was interested in taking these young people in on a tour, and I did, and I shared
Mhm.
the with them. I wasn't quite ready to give up me being in my presence in Mammoth Cave National Park at all.
Mm-hmm.
I still want to be there. I feel driven to be there. And I think it's important, although I'm 77 years old, 77 years young, whichever
Mm-hmm.
best, I'm still able to do a couple thousand steps a day and several miles in the cave. And so I feel that I continue to fulfill the story and
Mm-hmm.
people and show them names and dates. And some like the United States government are happy to invite me to do that, and I'm willing to come in and do that as a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it gives me an opportunity to further promote the story, and again tell people about folks that worked here for 100 years, brought
Mm-hmm.
here in slavery. After the Civil War, we stayed on, and this became my home.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to let you to know that there was a time when we were here. We were proud to be here. I don't like using the word forced. I'm just saying because of Jim Crow,
Mm-hmm.
we were told that we could no longer perform a job that we had for 101 years.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was an excellent opportunity for me to pick up from there and bat for people that couldn't bat for themselves.
Right.
And that's just exactly what I've done.
So what does this mean for your family? You have kids and grandkids, correct? You have children of your own and
Well,
grandkids or just children?
they've been in the cave with me and they're proud of the story, and I make sure that they know the story. The only thing that I haven't done yet is I need to create a book myself. I've helped
Mm-hmm.
people with material and other writers with things, but I really needed to produce something that's specifically produced by Jerry Bransford. So
Mm-hmm.
start on that at any time.
Yeah. Is there anything you've passed on to your family of your memories working as a tour guide?
Absolutely. My I have a great grandson and I have grandchildren, and my daughter, my 48-year-old daughter, passed away about 4 years ago with a
Oh,
terrible.
I'm sorry.
But well, thank you. We miss her terribly.
Mm,
A part of our heart that's missing, but we're pushing on and doing the best we can. But she did know the story, and I'm making
mm-hmm.
sure my grandchildren know the story. And actually, even at church, and I do things at civic clubs and high schools, and they invite me. I have a presentation that's been made by PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
So historical societies and organizations invite me to come and do that, and I've never accepted a penny for my attendance, sharing our story with the world. And I've done that for dozens of people,
Mm-hmm.
specifically about the
Mm-hmm.
Bransford Mammoth Cave and the Black Guides, named
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Doyle. Those people who were there for so long, and they were proud. They were considered master guides, and it breaks my heart that they were sent away with such less dignity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I so appreciate you, yeah, just taking the time to share um, this legacy with me and with everyone else that will be viewing this. People be able to rewatch the playback and hopefully gain more insight themselves of the legacy and the work that it took. And it being a significance for you because it's like a homecoming, visiting.
Come
I'm
in.
sure that the place for you every time and having that such a deep connection in that way,
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine it's profound. So
And I
thank you for doing this.
yes, and also I can't say enough for Mr. Superintendent Barclay Trimble, that he was so instrumental in helping me get that stone in there. He was so instrumental, he and others, getting the process sped up so I could see that obelisk in place before I retired. And he's
Mm-hmm.
very interested in the Black stories, so I thank
Mm-hmm.
him again for his help and his assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think the Cave Research Foundation, these are the people that explored the cave, and they had a passageway that discovered several years ago that each passageway has a name and a number, but little
Hmm.
did I know that they recommended to the council that this name would be called Jerry Bransford's Way in the cave.
Oh,
There was
wow.
already a Bransford Avenue there, named from
Hmm.
Bill Bransford, my third cousin, who was a member of the exploring team that found a cathedral dome in 1906. And so they named
Mm.
the passageway from Will Bransford, but I did not know that I was going to be honored to have a passageway named from me as well in the cave. And once these locations in the cave are named, that should never ever change. So I'm so proud of that.
Wow, that is wonderful. Well, this has been fantastic. I'm my brain is full, my heart is full. I'm so glad you're here to continue sharing these untold stories and experiences of your own, um, working for the National Park Service and still continuing as a volunteer is amazing. So I'm, again thinking about my work in um, Black and National Parks Week and why it's important to talk about, things like culture and community, and history and legacy. This is something I'm very passionate about because I want to learn more about those untold stories that I was not aware of, but had such an interest in the national parks and going to these places, to recreate and just to learn more about the history, of how they were created, from a Black perspective. And I'm receiving so much support, so much knowledge, and this is just giving me more motivation to keep moving forward and, um, to really keep moving and not give up. So thank you for that.
Well, it's such a powerful story. It's not, and I'm sure there's parts of the story that I don't know.
Hmm.
But going in that cave, it's almost as though when I stand in a place and show my tour guest Matt Bransford 1850, and by 1850 he had married and had three children, and then we walk another quarter of a mile and then we see his name 1880. I realized that his children had been sold. So
Hmm.
I wonder how he felt. And so I feel a powerful presence of those
Mm.
folks there for so long. And I want to make sure I tell their story. I'm glad to share it with
I'm sure they are so very proud, so very proud. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to, in this Zoom
you.
call. Thank you again, Jerry, Bransford, for tuning in, to have this conversation with me and to just share more about, what you do and your family history and the legacy of Mammoth Cave. Um, and yeah, I'm looking forward to, meeting you in person. I know we talked about, um, getting together at some point, and I would love to hopefully do another visit, to Mammoth Cave next year. Um, and yeah, just have my own experience and create my own memory. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Before I sign off, we still have a few talks happening today. Today's at the Southeast region. So, our next talk will be at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I had to look at the time because I'm like, what time is it? With Eric, Cedeno, and he is the bicycle nomad. So he has some really cool, stories to share about his experiences, um, cycling, through awesome places, including the Underground Railroad, retracing the route of Buffalo Soldiers. With their bike co-op, and yeah, there's so many amazing things coming up today. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully, you all are enjoying day 5 of Black and National Parks Week. And tomorrow I will be traveling to Pennsylvania. You mentioned that earlier, Jerry. I will be in Philly, visiting Valley Forge National Historical Park and doing a tour, with attendees and learning more about that history. So I'm really excited for that. Um, until next time, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for joining. And please, don't forget to, like, follow, share, family and friends, all of that, recording, so we can spread this knowledge and wonderful and amazing stories. Thank you all again. Thank you,
Okay.
Jerry.
Thank you. Talk with you soon.